So we've got a lot of humans still making decisions on whether a transaction is legitimate or not. And we know that some of the decisions do get blocked. I've seen that. Other people, again, who are listening to this will have seen that. There was a little thing that you're probably aware of called ChatGPT that came out just over a year ago. Surely we can just get AI to solve all of these problems for us.
Well, maybe at some point in the future. The problem that we have now is large language models like ChatGPT are very, very good at taking vast amounts of data, whether that's text or video or images, and spitting out something that looks legitimate, an image that looks really good. I mean, gosh, I think 6, 7 years ago, there was a website called This Person Does Not Exist, and it would give you high definition photos or what looked like photos of people that were all artificially created. And we've seen the same sort of evolution in conversational text things. The problem is that while it can look compelling, it's not necessarily precise. And while there's plenty of news items like ChatGPT can pass this test, whatever, if that information is freely available on the internet, then yes, it can regurgitate it. If you're asking it to do something super creative, I think, sort of give me instructions on how to bake an apple pie in the style of Chaucer or whatever, then yes, it can do that style switching. But when you're looking for something that's outside its scope of knowledge, it will fail. But it won't tell you that it doesn't know how to do it. It will come up with something convincing.
Yeah.
So you can feed it a very, very complex document and ask for a summary. It will always give you a summary. And that summary might feel right if you've skimmed the first page or so, but it won't necessarily be accurate. And when you look at complex legal texts, quite often it misses the point, and even the chapter headings can't be correct. I mean, I'm sure that will get fixed over time, but right now it's not that precise. So when you point it at financial transactions and say, give me a summary, is there any evidence of money laundering? It will come back with something. It might say yes, it might say no, but it will come back with something. And even when you try and dive into asking it to explain, it won't necessarily go back to the original transactions. You don't have that connection and that detail, and this is what it's missing. So until these models have the level of explainability that more historical AI models sort of have, and the industry's been pushing for ages, it's really, really difficult to use these models in any production system and feel good about it, because you've just not got that audit trail. And if you're taking that output and then using it, you've not got the confidence that it's accurate. And one of the ways that I talk to a lot of our customers about this is that, you need to think of AI as it's your room of interns. They will go away and they will do what you ask them to do, but you need to double check their homework, just like, anybody in their probation on a new job. You just want to double check that they're doing the right thing and give them that positive feedback. But when you're doing something really, really complex, and particularly in the money laundering sphere, where it's not a static problem, we're not looking for the same thing week in, week out, because the criminals have their own teams and they're changing up what they're doing because they're taking advantage of different markets. There's a huge influx over COVID of money laundering, taking advantage of the increase in funeral homes just with the higher death rates. So they will adapt based on where they think they can move the money and get the quickest turnaround. And if you trained a model based on historical data, it won't pick up those new patterns. You need to have a combination of that ability to look at large amounts of data, which AI gives us, with human intuition and problem solving, and also that fast feedback from what's happening in the world in order to spot these patterns. So, the LLMs and ChatGPT, they're not there yet. I'm not going to rule out that they won't ever be, but right now, because they're too historical and they don't have that explanation layer, they're just not suitable to be used.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. And obviously, my question was quite flippant about ChatGPT. Um, I think a lot of the people who are outside of the technical world at the moment obviously think that AI is capable of these things and it's doing all sorts of jobs and really well. And but again, I think if you go back to the ethical challenge around actually some people in society have they process their payments in a way that might not look legitimate, then AI would just penalise them, wouldn't it? Because it would potentially see that as a threat and it would automatically do that, and that might go unnoticed because a human isn't intervening. So I think there's still a lot of ethical challenges around how AI is used in the financial space and other spaces.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you're right about that perception of the people sort of outside the sphere. And that's mainly down to sort of a lot of the marketing that goes along with these things. Because, I mean, since the launch of ChatGPT, it's been super, super hyped as, this will replace all jobs and this will, this can do everything. We won't need to do X, Y, and Z, which is a lovely aspiration. But every time it's challenged as not being perfect, it gets brushed under the carpet. And I keep hearing it say, oh, the hallucination problem. Like it's this little petty thing. We don't need to worry about this. It's just a hallucination problem. And just the very language that's being used around this, the hallucination applies that it's this higher functioning thinking thing that's imagining amazing things when it's an output from sort of statistical solutions, basically, that's just pulled all this data together. And if you start applying the same thoughts and the same language to humans, it sounds really silly. It's like, if you fail your GCSE because you only get 40% right, you don't say you hallucinated 60% of it. You got 60% of it wrong. So we need to start applying the same language and the same methodology around precision that we've done to historical models, because we've already always had sort of accuracy and precision and really measuring what's our false positive rate, what's our false negative rate, how far are we deviating from truth in our predictions. And we need to start applying this to these models before they're allowed to be used in production, because once we've got that measure of error, and we need to call it what it is, it's error, then we can say, well, what is our acceptable risk for using these in productions, given that the error rate is X%, which is the same as we've had with previous models. And that's where we need to get to, that and the referencing and explainability side of it.
Yeah. And I think there's a key word in there, which is risk. When you look at finance and banking generally, they're incredibly risk averse, aren't they? But on the other challenge to that is there's a lot of manual processing and false positives around anti-money laundering as well. And obviously they want to reduce their costs. There's a lot of transactions that probably get flagged, that get investigated, that actually just waste people time because they've seen those patterns before. And so there's all these challenges, but the risk, I think, of introducing AI at the moment is so high that the financial institutions must be really, really cautious about that.
It does vary. So, depending on jurisdiction and how supported the financial institutions feel by the regulators in their area, that does affect how far they'll go with the AI. But you're absolutely right, they're very, very risk averse. And quite a lot of the conversations I have is about identifying that risk, because everyone wants to reduce false positives. But they think of it at that level. It's like, I want to reduce my false positives because then my team will be less overloaded and we can focus on the true positives and doing thorough research, which is a great aspiration. But when you say, what is your risk level? What are those false positives that you always want to see and investigate because they're in that uncertain area where you 100% want a human to look at it? And what are the ones that you never want to see? For exactly like you say, you've seen those patterns before and you're happy that those patterns are always things that can be safely discounted. And that's quite a difficult question to ask, because then you're looking at different patterns, different match protocols, and sometimes that can be hard to encapsulate in words because it's gut feel of experienced analysts. Or so that process needs to be understood. And if you're going to automate something, then you have to know what you're automating rather than just pointing towards an end result. But it doesn't mean you can't do it. You've just got to really think about it and get it right. And one of those big things is really doing that data analytics piece first, looking at the things that are causing the bottlenecks, where they are, and why they're causing the bottlenecks, and then applying the right fix at those points. And too often people jump straight to, we're overwhelmed, so let's throw AI at the problem. But then because they're pushing in poorly labeled and poorly classified data up front, they're not going to end up with a successful implementation.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. You mentioned before about we're obviously moving to a more digital environment. More and more payments are digital. And you mentioned about money launderers, criminals using different opportunities or looking for different ways to launder money digitally. And I know Marcus Desai, we've spoken to him about a similar issue with gaming and gaming cheating. Do you feel the industry is always catching up with what the criminals are doing, or do you think that AI and machine learning gives us an ability to start to maybe not preempt, but see the trends that humans aren't seeing and maybe spot things before a human could do?
I think there's definitely the case that these tools can help us spot things faster, because even the best human analysts, and even a team of human analysts, you're limited in the data that you can retain in memory at any one time. It doesn't matter how many sort of spreadsheets or BI tools you look at. You need to know what you're looking for in order for things to pop out for you. If you want to sort of step back and see everything and look for patterns in very large multidimensional data sets, you need tools for that. And that's what AI is very, very good at. That said, we are more restricted because we have to work within the law and we have to work within an ethical framework. And as such, we're limited on what data we can look at, where we can look at it. We have to keep data sets separate. We have to make sure that we're doing all of our testing so that we're not unfairly biasing, which is all good stuff and absolutely needs to be done. But the people that we're working up against, who are trying to make money and trying not to be caught, are not ascribing to all of those principles. So while we can detect a lot faster, the only way we can stay ahead is having that, say, the sort of red hat thinking of, if I was trying to move money, how could I potentially do this? And, where are the gaps? And I know a lot of reg techs are looking at, where might those gaps be, and try and plug those holes preemptively so that if someone moves into those gaps, that it will be detected. And the problem with that is it's really hard to measure ROI on that, because obviously there's a lot of effort into that preventative measure, but you can't you don't get that feedback of, well, how much have I stopped, because it's just not there unless something gets detected. But it's a really, really difficult problem. But yeah, I mean, it's very similar sort of finance, gaming, because that's kind of a similar sort of fraudulent process where people are looking to make money through fraud. And the defense industry, we're all actively working against bad actors who are using the same tools, which makes it a very different problem to, for example, healthcare, where if you're trying to detect a disease in a blood panel or in genetics, that's not changing under you to, maybe changing slightly, but it's not changing you in a way to prevent you detecting it deliberately. Whereas, in finance and defense and gaming, as with Marcus, it's really, really difficult, because you've got to be running all the time. You can't stop for an instant.